every single morning, you wake up and you just begin operating this machine that is so immensely powerful, it literally built the modern world.
Right.
I mean, this is the machine that mapped the stars, it split the atom, and it actually sent rovers all the way out to the edge of the solar system.
Which is incredible to think about.
It is. Yet, despite operating this machine every single second of your waking life,
Yeah.
you likely have absolutely no idea how it fundamentally works.
Well, we are just remarkably skilled at looking outward, The entirety of human history is essentially this long timeline of outward expansion and external conquest.
Right, exactly.
We always focus on the horizon, but we almost never point the lens back at the observer.
So today we are turning that lens around. Welcome to the deep dive. We are pulling from a really fascinating collection of philosophical dialogues and neuroscientific papers today.
Yeah, specifically tracking this highly rigorous conversation between two thinkers who are identified in our source material as Nick and Maya.
Right. And their primary mission here is to examine what they argue is humanity's greatest oversight, which is basically our complete failure to study ourselves.
Yeah. We have spent thousands of years, and I mean trillions of dollars, conquering the external environment, but we treat the internal environment, the human mind, as this complete afterthought.
It's so true.
And the premise Nick and Maya explore is that understanding our own cognitive machinery with the same rigorous scientific seriousness that we apply to astrophysics or like engineering, it isn't just an intellectual hobby.
No, not at all.
They build a very compelling case that it is the actual prerequisite for our continued survival as a species.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want you, the listener, to evaluate your own daily routine for a second. Think about the sheer volume of time you dedicate to understanding the external world.
Right, like just getting through the day.
Exactly. You read the news to understand the economy, you study the interface of a new software program for work, or you actively strategize how to navigate the complex social dynamics of your office.
Yeah, constantly processing external data.
Now, compare that immense cognitive effort to the amount of time you spend investigating the biological and neurological machinery inside your own head.
Maya actually captures this disproportionate focus perfectly in the text. She observes that every century of human existence has believed its greatest, most defining discoveries lay somewhere beyond its current geographic or technological boundaries.
Always pushing outward.
Always. Scaling Mount Everest, mapping the ocean floor, walking on the lunar surface, every single one of those external milestones fundamentally altered human civilization.
Yet, dragging along behind every single one of those milestones is this massive, unexamined paradox.
Yeah.
Nick points out the ultimate contradiction of our species. The exact same biological framework that is capable of conceptualizing advanced calculus and, composing unimaginably complex symphonies is the very same framework that invented the concept of total war.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, honestly.
It really is. The hardware that generates breathtaking, self-sacrificing compassion also reliably produces widespread systemic cruelty.
The duality is staggering when you look at it objectively. Like, how do those two extremes share the exact same physical housing?
Right.
And Nick's argument is that this paradox persists because space actually isn't the final frontier. We have been operating this incredibly volatile, powerful machinery completely blind.
It's honestly like humanity was handed this spectacularly powerful supercomputer, right? And we spent thousands of years using it to build monuments and cities, but we never once bothered to open the user manual to see how the computer actually works.
Yeah, it is a perfect analogy. And what's fascinating here is the underlying biological mechanism driving all this. Because previously, a lot of people thought of the brain as a static object.
Like a hard drive or something.
Exactly, like a hard drive. You were born with a certain brain, it recorded information, and that was it. You're stuck with it.
But the source material heavily emphasizes neuroplasticity. The brain is not rigid hardware at all. It is constantly physically rewiring itself.
Yeah, it's highly plastic. It adapts to its environment.
To make this concrete for you guys listening, imagine your brain as this massive, undeveloped landscape. When you learn something new or form a new habit, it's like driving a truck through a muddy field.
Oh, that's a good way to picture it.
Right. The first time, it's this bumpy, really difficult dirt road. But if you drive that same path every single day, if you repeat a behavior or a thought pattern, your brain actually paves that dirt road into a multi-lane concrete highway.
And in neuroscience, this is often summarized by Hebb's law, which is neurons that fire together wire together.
Fire together, wire together.
Exactly. When you repeat a thought or an action, your brain physically coats those specific neural connections in this fatty substance called myelin.
Yeah.
This myelination process insulates the circuit, and that makes the electrical signals travel much faster and with way less energy.
Which means the path of least resistance for your thoughts literally becomes the path that is most physically myelinated in your brain.
That is the crucial implication here. And Nick highlights that our subconscious mind acts as an indiscriminate sponge during our early development.
Just soaking everything up.
Right. It absorbs cultural values, societal prejudices, familial expectations, and it begins paving those highways long before your conscious, rational mind is mature enough to evaluate whether those ideas are actually true.
Wow. So by the time you reach adulthood, and you consciously think you're making a purely independent, rational choice about, say, your political views or your career path, you are often just letting your thoughts cruise down a highly paved, well-worn highway that your environment constructed for you.
Exactly. It's automatic.
And it takes immense active cognitive energy to force your thoughts off that highway and back into the mud to build a new road.
Which is why changing your mind feels physically uncomfortable. I mean, your brain is designed to conserve energy. And traveling unpaved neural pathways requires a massive expenditure of metabolic resources.
It's literally exhausting to change your mind.
It literally is.
But this biological reality brings us to a major point of friction in the dialogue, and I think it is a deeply necessary one. Maya does not just sit back and accept this neurophilosophical deep dive without a fight.
No, she definitely pushes back.
She looks at this concept of the brain as a highly plastic, energy-conserving machine, and she asks a very grounded question. If our minds are so incredibly complex, shouldn't we be pointing that computing power at the massive, tangible crises burning through the globe right now, rather than just sitting in a room studying our own neural pathways?
Her pushback is severe, and it's justified. She points to the urgent, cascading problems of our era, the accelerating impacts of climate change, the widening gap of economic inequality, and just the constant threat of global conflict.
Yeah.
Her challenge to Nick essentially boils down to asking whether studying the mind is simply navel-gazing while Rome actively burns to the ground.
And I really have to advocate for Maya here because I think most people listening would share her skepticism. I mean, if you are stressed about an impending round of layoffs at your company, or you were looking at the shocking price of groceries, or you were just watching geopolitical chaos unfold on the evening news, studying the myelination of your neurons feels like an absurd luxury.
It feels disconnected.
Exactly. It feels entirely disconnected from the actual literal fires burning outside your window.
It is the most pragmatic objection one could raise. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, Nick responds with a counter-argument that fundamentally reorients how we define a crisis.
Right? He flips it.
He dismantles the idea that these global issues are external events just sort of happening to us. Climate change, he notes, is not a meteor striking the Earth from deep space.
Right. A meteor is an anomaly. We couldn't prevent a meteor with better daily habits.
Exactly. But climate change, as Nick lays out, is the cumulative mathematical result of billions of individual human decisions happening every single day.
Billions of them.
And to understand why we consistently make decisions that harm our long-term survival, we have to look at the mechanics of the brain's reward center, specifically the dopamine system.
Which people usually just think of as the happy chemical.
Right. Dopamine is widely misunderstood just as a pleasure chemical, but its primary evolutionary function is anticipation and drive. It motivates us to seek out resources.
And in a primitive environment where calories were incredibly scarce, a dopamine spike that drove you to consume a massive amount of sugar or fat immediately, that was a brilliant survival mechanism.
It kept us alive. Today, however, that exact same biological drive has been scaled up to industrial proportions.
Yeah, big time.
That dopamine-driven desire for immediate reward is the foundational mechanism behind hyperconsumption, fast fashion, and the extraction of fossil fuels. We are biologically wired to heavily discount future risks, a concept known as hyperbolic discounting, in favor of immediate, tangible rewards.
So we engage in behaviors that provide an immediate economic or sensory dopamine hit, even if the long-term mathematical consequence is the flooding of our own coastal cities.
Yes. And Nick applies this identical structural logic to extreme inequality.
Oh, this part was wild.
Inequality is not a hurricane or a tectonic shift. It is a system. It is a system built by human minds, incentivized by human desires for status and resource hoarding, and perpetuated by human assumptions about hierarchy.
He is basically arguing that treating global conflict or climate change without treating the human mind is like trying to put out a fire by swatting at the smoke.
Slotting at the smoke, yeah.
The smoke is the warming planet, but the spark is our ancient, unexamined biological drives. The mechanism to extinguish the fire has to begin at the source of the ignition.
Which completely turns Maya's objection on its head. Understanding the brain is no longer a luxury reserved for academics. It is the fundamental tool required to re-engineer the systems that are currently failing us.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text dives deep into the specific biological hardware that is causing this spectacular evolutionary mismatch.
The mismatch is key.
We are trying to navigate a highly complex, interconnected modern society using biological tools that were forged in the Stone Age.
The mismatch is the root of our daily psychological friction. Our brains evolved over millions of years to ensure our survival in a primitive environment characterized by immediate physical life or death threats.
Yeah, a world of predators and severe resource scarcity.
But the hardware hasn't updated to match our new environment.
No, it hasn't. The source material details how every single morning you wake up and you carry these ancient survival systems in a modern office building or a crowded subway.
Right.
Let's look at the mechanics of the amygdala. The amygdala is essentially your brain's ancient threat detection radar. When it senses danger, it triggers this cascade of physiological responses, including the massive release of cortisol, which is the primary stress hormone.
The mechanism of that cortisol release is profound. When the amygdala sounds the alarm, the body prepares for fight or flight. It pumps blood away from your digestive system and into your major muscle groups.
To get ready to run.
Exactly. Your heart rate spikes to deliver oxygen faster. But most critically, this stress response actively suppresses the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for nuanced, rational, long-term thinking.
It just shuts it down.
Your brain literally shuts down its logic center because if a tiger is jumping out of the bushes, you don't need to mathematically analyze the tiger's trajectory. You just need to run.
Let's bring this right down to the listener's daily life. Think about the last time you received a passive-aggressive, highly critical email from your boss.
Oh, everyone knows that feeling.
Right. Your amygdala cannot differentiate between the social threat of that email and the physical threat of a stalking predator. It just senses danger. So it sounds the alarm. Your stomach drops, which is literally the blood leaving your digestive system.
Yeah.
Your heart rate spikes, and your prefrontal cortex goes completely offline.
And in that state of diminished rational capacity, you draft a furious, defensive reply.
Yes. Then, an hour later, the cortisol clears your system, your prefrontal cortex powers back up, you reread what you sent, and you wonder what on earth you were thinking.
You were experiencing an amygdala hijack.
Exactly. We are running a global, high-stakes civilization where people possess the technology to instantly communicate across continents, yet we are constantly reacting to one another through this hijacked lens of ancient tribal fear.
This raises an important question about the limits of raw data. Maya observes in the dialogue that the modern citizen has access to more information on their smartphone than any scholar in antiquity could have ever imagined.
Oh, yeah.
But total access to information has clearly not resulted in total wisdom.
We have a massive surplus of data, but a massive deficit of self-awareness.
True understanding, as the text argues, requires a deep, almost uncomfortable level of humility. It requires you to consciously accept that you are not the purely rational, objective actor you think you are.
Which is a tough pill to swallow.
It is. You are being constantly pushed and pulled by neurochemistry, by the layout of your environment, by invisible incentive structures, and by historical biases you didn't even know you absorbed.
Right.
And these aren't just abstract concepts for a philosophy seminar. This biological reality dictates the outcome of contract negotiations, legislative votes, and the arguments you have at your kitchen table.
Acknowledging that we are operating with this outdated hardware might sound incredibly bleak at first. I mean, if our neurochemistry is constantly hijacking our reason, are we just trapped?
It feels that way sometimes.
It does. But the dialogue pivots here to a highly actionable, almost optimistic framework. Once you understand how the machine actually works, You can stop fighting against its design flaws and start building structures that accommodate them.
And the text introduces the concept of the blank slate, specifically regarding systemic societal ills. Nick emphasizes a fundamental truth of human development, which is that no infant is born with racial prejudice.
Zero.
No child emerges into the world with a codified political ideology or an inherent drive for corporate greed.
Those are heavily paved neural highways constructed by the environment.
Exactly. They are entirely learned behaviors, deeply myelinated over time. And the core premise is that what is learned by the brain can be systematically unlearned, provided the environment changes to demand a different set of neural connections.
Okay, makes sense.
The dialogue contrasts this with historical institutions. For centuries, ancient philosophies have told humanity to know thyself, but the actual institutions holding power, empires, states, historical religious structures, they did not incentivize self-discovery.
No, they incentivize compliance.
Mm.
It's much easier to govern a population that just follows orders than one that questions its own underlying assumptions.
Exactly. They operated by telling people what to think. But Maya's vision for redesigning society requires a shift toward teaching people how to think.
Which is a huge difference.
Those are two radically different methodologies. Dictating what to think relies on external authority. Teaching how to think requires building an individual's internal cognitive capacity to recognize their own logical fallacies.
Maya paints this amazing picture of what an updated educational system would look like. Imagine a curriculum where learning the mechanics of your own mind is treated with the exact same weight as algebra or grammar.
That would change everything.
It really would. She advocates for explicitly teaching children emotional regulation, like how to recognize an amygdala hijack before they react to it. Teaching scientific reasoning not just for chemistry class, but for evaluating daily information. And crucially, teaching the psychology of bias.
Consider the mechanism of confirmation bias, right? The brain seeks out information that validates its existing heavily paved highways, because updating those highways costs metabolic energy.
Right, it's just trying to save calories.
Exactly. But if you teach a generation to recognize that feeling of cognitive dissonance not as an attack on their identity, but as a biological mechanism trying to save energy, you completely change how society debates.
Maya envisions a culture where altering your stance on an issue because you are presented with new evidence isn't framed as a political weakness or a hypocritical flip-flop. It is culturally celebrated as a demonstration of high cognitive capacity. We could build environments where asking a probing, curious question commands more respect than delivering a perfectly rehearsed, aggressive soundbite.
And while it sounds utopian, Nick and Maya frame it as an engineering problem. And for the listener engaging with this material right now, this knowledge transfers a significant amount of personal responsibility onto your shoulders.
How does understanding neuroscience obligate the listener? I mean, what does it require of us?
Well, because once you understand the mechanics, ignorance is no longer a valid shield. If you know that your dopamine system drives you toward destructive short-term scrolling, you have a responsibility to design your physical environment to prevent it.
Like just charging your phone in another room.
Yeah, exactly. If you know how the amygdala works, you have a responsibility to engineer a pause into your arguments with your partner to allow the prefrontal cortex to catch up.
Just walk away for a minute.
Right. You stop trying to aggressively force people to change through sheer willpower, and you start designing environments in your home, your office, your community, where the better angels of our nature are biologically incentivized to emerge.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize the entirety of Nick and Maya's dialogue, the overarching conclusion is that humanity's most vital frontier isn't the bottom of the ocean or the surface of Mars.
No, it's not.
The greatest discovery in our history will be achieving a functional, mechanical understanding of the minds that are attempting to comprehend the universe.
Yeah.
Swapping out one political leader for another or passing a new piece of legislation will not solve our cascading global crises if the underlying biological hardware driving those crises remains unexamined.
And that leads to a deeply provocative implication regarding our immediate future.
Oh, this is the really heavy part.
Yeah. The source text focuses heavily on human minds building a better human society. But if you look at the reality of our current technological landscape, humanity is currently racing toward the creation of artificial general intelligence. We are, quite literally, attempting to engineer entirely new synthetic minds.
The ultimate external creation.
Consider the mechanical danger of that pursuit. If we have not yet read our own user manual, if we remain blind to how our subconscious biases are formed, And if we still routinely allow our ancient hardware to hijack our rational thought, what unseen catastrophic flaws are we currently hard-coding into the artificial minds that will manage the future of our civilization?
It's terrifying.
The unexamined blind spots of the creator will inevitably become the foundational code of the creation.
If we don't understand the machinery inside our own heads, we are programming the future of intelligence using a Stone Age framework. That's a really heavy critical reality to process.
Yeah, it really is.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with a direct question to carry through the rest of your week. We have spent this entire time outlining the infinitely complex, incredibly powerful biological machine sitting right behind your eyes. If the most important frontier for human survival is internal, what territory have you deliberately left uncharted in your own mind? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.